This week is really one of my favorite Parshiot Torah portions, and it's not only because of the content. This week was my bar mitzvah many years ago. It was my father's bar mitzvah more years ago than that. It was my sister's bat mitzvah, and last year it was my son's bar mitzvah. And so in honor of all of those really amazing moments in my family's life, I love getting to Parshat Lech Lecha. Now, when we talk about the parasha, many times we focus on the command from God, which seemingly comes from nowhere to Avram. Go, go, Lech Lecha, the doubling of language. In the Hasidic understanding, Lech Lecha means go lecha, go into yourself, which we might imagine is only truly possible when we individuate. And so Avram has to leave what he knows behind. He has to leave his father's home, his ancestral homeland. He has to leave the familiar in order to arrive somewhere new. There's something really beautiful and hard about that journey towards the self. But what I wanted to point at in this week's Parsha is a section that we don't typically look at, especially when we're teaching children. It's just one of those stories. But in fact, the model of children at different developmental stages, how hard it is to learn how to share, is precisely what happens at the moment of Avram's emergence and his family's growth. You see, Avram and Sarai leave the land of Haran and they travel together. There's a famine in the land of Canaan where they go, and then they end up going down to Egypt. And the complicated part of the Torah, and there are many, includes the way men and women are treated, how they look at each other, specifically how women are looked at. But what I want to point at is that when they leave, somehow unified again after incredible difficulty, and you can look at chapter 12 of the book of Genesis, and that's a different topic, but worthy of mention even when speaking about the next section. When you look at chapter 13, Avram and Sarai and their family, including Lot and his family, leave. Now, Avram and Sarai haven't yet had children, and we know from the stories of matriarchs and patriarchs that the struggle to have children typifies every generation's deepest yearnings, most painful experiences. It animates our prayer, and certainly on Rosh Hashanah, that is all of our liturgy, the prayer for a future, and the struggle to have children in particular. When we look at them traveling with Lot, Lot is actually in some ways a surrogate son before they have Yishmael, before Hagar and Avram have Yishmael, and before having Isaac. But if you look at those in sequence, that tells us some of what's about to happen. Because right now in chapter 13 of the book of Bereshit, of Genesis, they have a lot of stuff. Avram and his family have a lot of stuff, and Lot and his family have a lot of stuff. Lot is the nephew, but the vicarious child also. And Avram and Lot's shepherds argue about how can we sustain our flocks on this land. And Avram very quickly says, well, set your eyes on this land. You choose a place. If you choose left, I'll go right. If you choose right, I'll go left. And in some ways that's beautiful, but in some ways there's a willingness to let go of something very precious in order to preserve some semblance of peace. See, peace doesn't work like that, really. And in fact, the text says it pretty intensely. V'lo yachlu lashevet yachdav. They couldn't be together. How sad. And Avram sounds magnanimous. You choose the place and I'll go the other place. But that shouldn't be how family grows. And there are families that, thank God, are blessed with enormous means and wealth and property. Even those families aren't immune from the real complicated dynamics that do touch families often. And so what happens is that Lot chooses a place called Sdom, Sodom and Gomorrah, Sdom, and the Torah describes it as Kigan Hashem, like it's the garden of God. And it's a very interesting thing. The commentators pick up on this, and the Zohar in particular says, what made Sdom, Sodom and Gomorrah, so attractive? What made it like a garden of God? Like Egypt, actually, the text also says. So the Zohar says that Sdom and Amorah and Egypt didn't require human hands to till the soil in order for there to be enough. They didn't have to worry. The Nile or the Jordan provides. So Lot saw that as favorable specifically for sheep. And on the logical level, great. That makes perfect sense. On the surface, that's great. Except what also typified Sdom and Amorah, as we come to learn very soon, is that just because they had enough doesn't mean they were willing to share. And so too at this moment when Avram and Lot, the shepherds, who are their proxies really, disagree. And I'm teaching this consciously on the day after an election in America. Just because they have so much doesn't mean they know how to coexist. V'lo yachlu lashevet yachdav. The text says they didn't know how to sit together. They didn't know how to be together. And think for ourselves about our own families' lives. Even when you have enough, that doesn't mean we know how to be together. May we be blessed to have enough, but may we be willing to do what Avram was not willing to do. It seems in a certain sense that he was willing to let go of Lot. You go your way, I'll go mine. It sounds magnanimous. It's also conflict avoidant. I'm not saying it's easy in anyone's family to say, let's actually talk about the hard stuff. In my family, I'm sure in yours, there are items, especially when one generation passes, that become so precious that they're contested over by siblings or cousins. It's very, very common. Our Parsha tells us that we shouldn't be willing to let go of each other because of stuff. We should be willing to talk to each other and to say, actually, we have enough. Is there a way to share? Is there a way for me to know what's so precious to me, which is you, my family, that I'm willing to sacrifice some of my stuff so that we can be together? You see, one of the hidden messages here is that Abraham is promised by God the entirety of the land. And then he says to Lot, well, you choose what you would like. On the one hand, Avram's willing to give up some stuff, but Lot doesn't seem to be willing. And then Lot goes to a place which is typified by the inability to appreciate what you have. So the big blessing for today, and I offer it in the name of all of the joy my family has shared this week in the Torah because of my bar mitzvah and my father's and my sister's and my son's. May you be blessed to see how much you have and to let the gratitude well up inside of you, so much so that sharing is no obstacle and holding on to each other something possible. May we be blessed to hold on to each other so well that sharing feels just a little bit easier. And if that can be true inside my heart and inside of my smaller version of our shared family, may we be blessed as a country and as a world to see sharing as not some prophetic ideal we can't reach, but to see bridging each other's differences as the way forward so that we can have a promise that's bigger than a nation or a family divided.